Chapter 1. The Mysterious Disappearance. It was a quiet evening in London, the kind of evening that, to most, would seem uneventful. The gas lamps flickered faintly in the mist of the cold winter air. Inside 221B, Baker Street, Sherlock Holmes sat in his favorite armchair, violin in hand, his mind as sharp as ever but momentarily lost in the tune of a melancholic melody. His keen eyes, however, never missed a detail, even when seemingly lost in the rhythm of music. His companion, Dr. John Watson, sat across from him, reading the evening edition of the Times, occasionally muttering under his breath about the latest political scandal. Watson had long since learned that silence was often the best way to enjoy the company of the great detective, especially on evenings like this, when Holmes seemed more introspective than usual. The peace of the evening was shattered when a sharp knock on the door interrupted their solitude. Holmes, without looking up, set his violin down gently and rose to open the door. Standing there was a man, his face pale with anxiety. He wore a long coat, but his disheveled appearance indicated that he had been through some distressing ordeal. "Mr. Holmes," the man began, his voice trembling, "I need your help. My daughter, Lady Evelyn, has disappeared." Holmes raised an eyebrow and gestured for the man to enter. "Please, come in and tell me more about this matter." The man hesitated, glancing nervously at Watson, but Holmes offered a reassuring nod. "Dr. Watson is a trusted friend and colleague. You may speak freely in front of him." "Thank you," the man said, his voice still shaky. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "My name is Sir Reginald Barnwell. I am the Earl of Ashford, and my daughter, Lady Evelyn, has gone missing. She was last seen at our family estate in Surrey, but since then, no one has heard from her. I have reason to believe that she was abducted." Holmes's eyes sparkled with interest. "Abduction, you?" An abandoned estate outside London, they found themselves trapped in a deadly game of cat and mouse. Chapter 10. The Revelation. In the end, Holmes uncovered the truth. Lady Evelyn had been in league with Graves all along. The entire kidnapping had been staged to cover up a vast criminal empire that spanned continents. But with Holmes's intervention, Graves' plans were thwarted and Lady Evelyn was safely returned. The Barnwell family's dark secrets had been exposed, and the criminal mastermind, Alexander Graves, was once again on the run. But for Holmes, it was just another case solved, a testament to his unparalleled intellect and ability to uncover the truth hidden in the shadows. The case was closed, but the mystery of Alexander Graves lingered, a reminder that the world of crime was never truly free of danger. Tell me everything." Sir Reginald took a deep breath, his eyes darting nervously around the room. "Lady Evelyn is a remarkable woman. Intelligent, beautiful, and well-liked by everyone who knows her. She had no enemies, no reason to disappear. But 2 nights ago, she was found missing from her bedroom. The only clue we found was a small, delicate brooch, a family heirloom, left on her bed." "Interesting," Holmes murmured, his mind already whirring with possibilities. "What do you suspect? Is there anyone who might wish her harm?" "I can't think of anyone," Sir Reginald replied. "But there is something strange. A few weeks ago, Lady Evelyn had received a letter. It was a simple note, but the handwriting was unfamiliar to us. She didn't share its contents with anyone, but she seemed disturbed by it. She locked herself in her room for hours after reading it." Holmes leaned forward, his interest piqued. "May I see this letter?" "I brought it with me," Sir Reginald said, reaching into his coat pocket and pulling out a small envelope. He handed it to Holmes, who examined it carefully. The letter itself was unremarkable, but the handwriting was precise and elegant, with an odd, almost untraceable slant. Holmes squinted at it, his mind running through a series of deductions. "Very well, Sir Reginald," Holmes said, standing up. "I believe we have much to discuss. Watson, we shall need your assistance. We are going to Surrey, to the Barnwell estate, to investigate this matter further." Chapter 2. The Barnwell Estate. The following morning, Holmes and Watson boarded the train to Surrey. The journey was uneventful, save for Holmes's quiet musings on the case. Watson, Ever the observer noticed the intensity with which Holmes studied the letter. He had seen that look before, the look that meant the detective was on the verge of a breakthrough, though the precise nature of that breakthrough remained a mystery. As they approached the Barnwell estate, the grandeur of the manor became apparent. It was a sprawling property, nestled in the countryside, far from the bustle of London. The house itself stood like a fortress, a testament to the old wealth of the Barnwell family. However, something about the place seemed off to Holmes. He could feel it in the air, a lingering sense of unease. Sir Reginald met them at the front door, his face ashen. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice strained. "Please follow me." They were led through the large, opulent halls of the mansion, the walls adorned with portraits of past Barnwell ancestors. As they passed by the family portraits, Holmes's sharp eyes picked out details that most would have missed. A glint in the eye of one of the ancestors, a shadow cast strangely on a figure in another. It was the subtle things, the small inconsistencies, that always caught his attention. They reached Lady Evelyn's room, which had been left untouched since her disappearance. The door creaked as it opened, revealing a room that was both beautiful and serene, but now empty and forlorn. The bed was neatly made, the curtains drawn, and yet there was something unsettling about the stillness of the room. Holmes immediately began to examine the area. "The brooch?" he asked. Sir Reginald nodded, pointing to a small wooden box on the bedside table. "It was left here, right in the center of her bed. We don't know what it means." Holmes picked up the brooch delicately, examining the intricate craftsmanship. "This is a fine piece of work," he muttered to himself. "But it is not the brooch that interests me. It is the fact that it was left here, as if it were deliberately placed. Almost as if the kidnapper wanted you to find it." Watson watched in silence as Holmes moved to the window. The detective's gaze swept over the estate grounds, his mind racing through possibilities. "I have a theory," Holmes said finally. "Lady Evelyn's disappearance is not a random act. Whoever took her had planned it in advance. The letter she received, the brooch left behind, all of it points to a single conclusion. Someone wanted to send a message." Holmes turned to face Sir Reginald, his eyes narrowing. "The question is, what message did they intend to send?" Chapter 3: Uncovering Hidden Truths. Back in London, Holmes and Watson pored over the details of the case. While Sir Reginald had been helpful in providing them with information about Lady Evelyn, there were still many questions left unanswered. The letter, the brooch, the eerie quiet of the Barnwell estate, all of it seemed to lead to one conclusion: something dark was at play. Holmes sat in his study, surrounded by the letters and papers related to the case. Watson sat across from him, a cup of tea in hand, waiting for Holmes to reveal his thoughts. "I've been thinking, Watson," Holmes began, his voice low. "There is something familiar about this case, something that doesn't quite fit. The letter, for example, the handwriting is unusual, but it is not entirely foreign to me. I've seen a similar script before. In fact, I know exactly where." Watson looked up in surprise. "Where?" Holmes leaned back in his chair, his eyes gleaming with determination. "The handwriting resembles that of a notorious criminal I once encountered, a man known as Alexander Graves. Graves is a former associate of Moriarty, a master manipulator who has since disappeared from the public eye. His connection to the Barnwell family is something I intend to investigate further." As the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, Holmes realized that the case was far more complex than he had initially believed. This was no ordinary kidnapping. Lady Evelyn's disappearance was part of a larger, more sinister plot. And at the center of it all was a criminal mastermind from Holmes's past. Chapter 4: The Shadow of Alexander Graves. The revelation that the handwriting on the mysterious letter bore a resemblance to that of Alexander Graves sent a shiver down Watson's spine. Alexander Graves was no ordinary criminal. His intellect rivaled Holmes's own, and his ability to manipulate people and events was legendary. He had once been a trusted associate of Professor Moriarty, the Napoleon of crime, before disappearing from public view. It was said that he had been working on a scheme so grand in scale that even Moriarty had underestimated its potential. If Graves was involved in Lady Evelyn's disappearance, then the situation was far more dangerous than Holmes had first anticipated. Holmes's thoughts were racing. He had always kept a watchful eye on Graves, but the criminal's sudden disappearance had made it nearly impossible to track him. Now, it seemed, Graves had reappeared, and with him, a new, disturbing game was underway. The question remained, why had Graves targeted Lady Evelyn? Holmes leaned forward, his eyes scanning the pile of papers before him, as Watson observed in silence. We need to find out more about Graves' past dealings with the Barnwell family. It is no coincidence that Lady Evelyn is involved in this, Holmes mused aloud, tapping his fingers against the table. What do you suggest we do next? Watson asked, sensing the gravity of the situation. We must visit the Barnwell estate again, Holmes replied. There are questions that Sir Reginald has not yet answered, and I suspect there are hidden truths within that house. Lady Evelyn's disappearance is a puzzle, but I am convinced that the Barnwells have more to reveal than they realize. Holmes was already on his feet, gathering his coat and hat. Watson, as always, followed closely behind. They were soon on their way back to Surrey, the train speeding through the English countryside toward the Barnwell estate. Chapter 5. Secrets in the Walls. Upon arriving at the Barnwell estate once more, the atmosphere was decidedly different. The air seemed thicker with tension, as though the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to unfold. The grand manor loomed before them, its cold stone exterior hiding whatever secrets lay within. Sir Reginald greeted them at the door, his face drawn with worry. Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, thank you for returning so quickly. I trust you've made progress. Holmes gave a curt nod. We have a few more questions, Sir Reginald. This time, I believe we need to investigate the family history more closely. We must understand the full scope of your connections. Sir Reginald led them through the familiar halls of the manor, but this time, Holmes's eyes were sharp, noticing things he had not observed during his first visit. The portraits of Barnwell ancestors seemed almost to leer down at him, their expressions etched with pride and power. The air felt heavy with the weight of history, as though the walls themselves held memories of long-forgotten deeds. This way, Sir Reginald said, opening a door to a room that appeared to be a study. This was my late father's study. He kept many of his most important papers here. Holmes stepped inside, his mind already working as he scanned the room. It was impeccably neat, the shelves lined with books on politics, history, and law. However, Holmes's sharp gaze was drawn to a cabinet in the corner, which appeared slightly out of place. It was a dark, wooden piece with an intricate lock. Would you mind if we had a look inside? Holmes asked, his voice smooth but commanding. Sir Reginald hesitated, but then nodded reluctantly. I suppose it would be fine, though I must warn you, I have not opened that cabinet in years. It belonged to my father, and I never had the courage to go through it. Holmes wasted no time. He approached the cabinet, examining the lock with the precision of a master locksmith. Within moments, he had it open, revealing a collection of papers, journals, and what appeared to be several maps. One of the journals caught Holmes's eye. It was leather-bound, worn from years of use. He flipped it open and began to scan the pages, his brow furrowing as he read. Watson moved closer, peering over his shoulder. What is it, Holmes? Watson asked, his voice low. Holmes's eyes narrowed. It seems that your late father was involved in something far more sinister than you may have realized, Sir Reginald. These journals document several meetings with none other than Alexander Graves. Sir Reginald's face paled. Graves? But how could that be? My father was a respected man. He never associated with criminals. Holmes didn't look up. It would appear that your father's relationship with Graves was far more complex than you understood. And it seems that Graves has been involved in the Barnwell family's affairs for much longer than we realized. Watson exchanged a glance with Holmes. Do you think Graves has been manipulating the Barnwells for all these years? Holmes nodded slowly. It's entirely possible. This is no ordinary kidnapping, Sir Reginald. Graves has a hand in something far larger, and Lady Evelyn is but one piece of the puzzle. Chapter 6. The Hidden Connection. Holmes spent the next few hours carefully combing through the journals, cross-referencing dates and details. As he did, a pattern began to emerge, one that hinted at a long-standing connection between the Barnwell family and Alexander Graves. The journals described a series of business transactions that seemed innocent enough on the surface, but were, in fact, part of a complex web of covert dealings. There were mentions of land acquisitions, investments, and even shadowy meetings in foreign countries. The more Holmes read, the more it became clear that Sir Reginald's father had been involved in a series of illegal activities, all orchestrated by Graves. But there was more. The journals also mentioned a mysterious woman who seemed to be at the center of these dealings, a woman whose name was never written down, only referred to as the Lady in the Shadows. Holmes' eyes gleamed with interest. He had encountered many enigmatic figures in his career, but this one intrigued him. Who was she, and what role had she played in these dark dealings? Holmes set the journal aside and turned to Sir Reginald. "Tell me, Sir Reginald, do you know of anyone in your family who might have been involved with Graves after your father's death? Someone who might have carried on his dealings?" Sir Reginald seemed to struggle with the question. I'm not sure. My brother, Edmund, has always been somewhat secretive. But I never thought. Holmes raised a hand. "Edmund? Does he live here?" Sir Reginald nodded. "Yes, though he has been away on business for the past few weeks. But I'll admit he has always been a bit distant. Perhaps you should speak with him." Holmes stood up, his mind already racing. "We shall. I have a feeling that Edmund Barnwell holds the key to unraveling this entire mystery." Chapter 7. Edmund Barnwell's Secret. Holmes and Watson set off to find Edmund Barnwell, whose sudden disappearance had raised more questions than answers. Sir Reginald led them to a wing of the manor that had been largely abandoned for years. It was clear that Edmund had secluded himself in this part of the estate, away from the prying eyes of his family. The door to Edmund's room creaked as Sir Reginald opened it, revealing a dark, musty space. The curtains were drawn tightly shut, casting the room in shadow. At the center of the room was a desk, cluttered with papers, books, and several maps. Edmund's personal belongings were scattered haphazardly around the room, indicating that he had been living in a state of disarray. Holmes immediately went to the desk, his eyes scanning the papers with practiced speed. Watson followed closely behind, trying to make sense of the chaos. "Here," Holmes said suddenly, holding up a letter. "This is from Alexander Graves." The letter was handwritten, its contents cryptic but unmistakable. "The deal is in motion. Lady Evelyn is the final piece. Ensure she is ready by the end of the week. I will return soon." "Graves is directly involved," Watson murmured. "But what does this mean for Lady Evelyn?" Holmes's expression hardened. "It means that Lady Evelyn's disappearance was not an accident. Graves has been planning something monumental, and Lady Evelyn is at the heart of it." Chapter 8. The Lady in the Shadows. As Holmes and Watson dug deeper into the mystery, it became clear that Graves had been orchestrating events for years, using the Barnwell family as pawns in his larger scheme. Lady Evelyn's disappearance was not just a kidnapping, it was a carefully calculated move, a part of a larger plan that had been set in motion long before she was taken. The mysterious Lady in the Shadows from the journals became a focal point of their investigation. Holmes soon discovered that this woman was none other than a former lover of Alexander Graves, a woman whose name had been deliberately erased from history. She had been the mastermind behind many of the criminal activities that Graves had orchestrated, using her charm and cunning to manipulate those around her. As Holmes pieced together the final details, he began to suspect that Lady Evelyn herself might have been more involved than anyone had realized. Could she have known more about the dealings between her family and Graves than she had let on? Was her disappearance part of a larger plan that she had set into motion? Chapter 9. The Final Confrontation. The closer Holmes got to the truth, the more dangerous the case became. Every step brought him closer to Alexander Graves and the dark web of deceit that had entangled the Barnwell family. The final confrontation was inevitable. Holmes, Watson, and Sir Reginald prepared to face the criminal mastermind and uncover the full extent of his plans. But when they finally tracked Graves to